The endless void of space stretched before Jack as he guided his cargo ship through the asteroid belt of System GX-349. 15 years of hauling supplies between mining outposts had taught him to expect the unexpected, but nothing could have prepared him for what his sensors picked up that day. Warning: unknown vessel detected. Classification: escape pod. Status: critical damage. The ship's computer announced in its monotone voice. Jack leaned forward in his pilot's seat, his weathered face illuminated by the glow of multiple screens. The escape pod was small, barely larger than a storage container, and it was tumbling erratically between the asteroids. Its hull showed signs of weapons fire. "Computer, scan for life signs," he commanded, already adjusting his course to intercept. One life form detected. Biological signature unknown. Life signs weakening. Jack wasn't the type to leave someone to die in space, human or not. He carefully maneuvered his ship alongside the pod, engaging the magnetic tethers to stabilize it. The docking procedure took precious minutes as he carefully aligned the airlocks. When the seals finally engaged with a satisfying hiss, Jack grabbed his emergency medkit and rushed to the airlock. The pod's exterior was covered in strange markings he'd never seen before, and its design was like nothing in human space. The airlock cycled, and Jack stepped through, breath catching in his throat at what he found inside. Sprawled across the pod's single seat was a humanoid figure that seemed to be made of living crystal. Her skin, if it could be called that, shimmered with colors that reminded him of opals, shifting from blue to green to purple with each shallow breath she took. "Hey," he said softly, approaching with his hands raised. "I'm here to help." The alien's eyes fluttered open, revealing irises that looked like swirling galaxies. She tried to speak, but only managed a weak cough. Jack's med scanner beeped as it analyzed her injuries. "Multiple internal injuries," he muttered, reading the display, "but nothing immediately fatal. Let's get you somewhere more comfortable." He carefully lifted her from the pod, surprised by how light she was despite her crystalline appearance. She felt warm to the touch, dispelling his initial thought that she might be cold like stone. The alien grabbed his sleeve weakly. "Thank you," she managed in perfect English, though her voice had an odd musical quality to it. "You speak English?" Jack asked as he carried her to his ship's small medical bay. "Universal translator," she explained, wincing as he set her down on the medical bed. "I am Lyra." "Jack," he replied, already hooking up the medical monitors. "What happened to you?" Lyra's galaxy-like eyes filled with what looked like luminescent tears. "They killed my husband," she whispered. "The purifiers. They're cleansing our world of anyone who supports contact with other species. We tried to escape together, but..." Her voice trailed off as grief overwhelmed her. Jack's hands stilled on the medical equipment. He'd heard rumors of political upheaval in some of the more distant alien civilizations, but this was the first he'd encountered a victim of it directly. "You're safe now," he assured her, administering a universal painkiller that his scanner indicated would be compatible with her biology. "Rest. We can talk more when you're stronger." Lyra nodded slightly, her crystalline features relaxing as the medication took effect. Just before she drifted off to sleep, she murmured something that Jack barely caught. "The bond. I don't have much time." Jack frowned at her words but focused on treating her immediate injuries. He didn't know then that he'd just taken the first step on a journey that would change both their lives forever, or that the mysterious bond she mentioned would soon become the center of a decision that would test everything he believed about love, duty, and what it meant to be human. As his ship drifted through the asteroid field, automatic systems engaged to continue their journey to the next outpost. Jack watched the strange alien woman sleep and wondered what sort of trouble he'd gotten himself into this time. 3 days into their journey to the nearest space station, Jack found himself fascinated by his unusual passenger. Lyra had recovered enough to move around the ship, though she still moved with careful slowness. Her crystalline form caught the ship's lights in mesmerizing ways, creating rainbow patterns on the walls as she walked. "Your food processing unit is quite interesting," Lyra said one morning, studying the ship's small kitchen area. She held up a coffee mug, turning it in her hands. "We luminary absorb energy directly through our outer layer. The concept of drinking is foreign to me." Jack watched her from across the small dining area, sipping his coffee. "So you're like a living solar panel." "Similar, yes." She smiled, the expression making her face shimmer. "Though we can process many types of energy. Light, heat, electrical, all of it helps sustain us." As she spoke, Jack noticed something odd. The usual bright colors shifting beneath her crystalline skin seemed duller than when he'd first found her. At first, he'd attributed it to her injuries, but now he wasn't so sure. "Are you feeling all right?" he asked. "You seem less colorful." Lyra's hand went to her chest, a gesture he'd noticed she made when nervous. "I'm fine," she said quickly. Too quickly. "Just still recovering." Before Jack could press further, the ship's computer interrupted. "Approaching debris field. Manual navigation recommended." "Excuse me," Jack said, heading to the cockpit. To his surprise, Lyra followed him. "May I watch?" she asked. "Space looks different through a ship's viewport than through our crystalline vessels." Jack gestured to the co-pilot's seat, and Lyra settled in, her eyes wide with wonder as she watched him work the controls. He guided the ship through the field of space debris, remnants of some long-ago battle or accident. "Your species has remarkable adaptability," Lyra commented, watching his hands move across the controls. "The luminary requires special interfaces because of our crystalline structure. But you humans, you create such clever solutions with your organic limitations." "Limitations?" Jack laughed. "That's a new way of looking at it." "Oh, I didn't mean." Lyra started, then stopped as a small shudder ran through her form. She gripped the armrest, her colors flickering briefly. "That's it," Jack said firmly, engaging the autopilot once they were clear of the debris. "Something's wrong. And don't tell me it's just your injuries." Lyra was quiet for a long moment, her galaxy eyes focused on the stars ahead. "Among my people," she finally said, "we form bonds, not just emotional ones, but physical, energetic connections with our chosen mates. These bonds sustain us, allow us to share energy, keep our crystalline forms stable." Jack felt a cold knot form in his stomach. "And without your husband?" "The bond was broken when he died," she confirmed quietly. "Without it, my form will gradually become unstable. I can survive for a while, but eventually." She trailed off, leaving the implications hanging in the recycled ship air. "How long?" Jack asked, his voice rough. "A few weeks, perhaps a month." Lyra's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I didn't want to burden you with this knowledge." Jack ran a hand through his hair, processing this new information. "There must be something we can do. Other luminary who could help." "The only cure is a new bond," Lyra said. "And with the purifiers hunting any luminary who associate with other species." She stopped, clearly reluctant to continue. "What aren't you telling me?" Lyra turned to face him, her galaxy eyes swirling with emotion. "There is one possibility. Our scientists discovered that humans are compatible. Your species' unique energy patterns can form bonds with ours. But I would never ask that of you. Such a bond is permanent, life-changing. It would be too much to ask of someone who barely knows me." Jack sat back in his pilot's seat, staring out at the stars. The implications of what she was saying, and wasn't saying, were staggering. He had just wanted to help someone in need, and now he was faced with a decision that could alter the course of both their lives forever. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the quiet hum of the ship's engines pushing them through the endless night of space. A week had passed since Lyra's revelation, and the changes in her were becoming impossible to ignore. The once vibrant colors beneath her crystalline surface had faded to muted pastels, and tiny cracks had begun appearing along her arms, hairline fractures that seemed to grow longer each day. Jack found her in the cargo hold that morning, attempting to absorb energy directly from the ship's auxiliary power conduits. She stood with her hands pressed against the metal wall, her form trembling with effort. "That's not going to work," he said softly, making her jump. "You're just draining my ship's power for nothing." Lyra stepped back from the wall, swaying slightly. "I had to try something. The pain, it's getting worse." For the first time, Jack noticed the web-like pattern of cracks spreading across her face, like fractured glass catching the light. His heart clenched at the sight. "Why didn't you tell me it was this bad?" he asked, moving forward to steady her as she stumbled. "Because I've seen how you look at me when you think I don't notice," she replied, her galaxy eyes dimmer than ever. "You're kind, Jack. Too kind. I feared you might offer to bond with me out of pity, and I couldn't bear that." "Tell me everything," Jack said, leading her to a stack of secure cargo containers where they could sit. "No more half-truths. What exactly happens in this bond?" Lyra took a shuddering breath. "When luminary bond, we share our essence with our mate. Our energy patterns intertwine, becoming one. With humans, the process adapts your bioelectric field to match our crystalline frequency. You would remain human, but you would carry a part of me within you, and I a part of you." "And it's permanent?" Jack asked, watching another crack form along her neck. "Yes. If either partner dies, the other feels it. That's why widowed luminary rarely survive long without finding a new bond." She looked down at her hands, where the cracks were most visible. "The bond also means sharing emotions, sometimes even thoughts. Many humans would find that invasive." Jack was quiet for a moment, processing this. "You said your people discovered humans were compatible. How?" Lyra's colors shifted slightly, the equivalent of a blush. "There were a few cases, before the purifiers gained power. Human traders who fell in love with luminary. The bonds formed naturally between them, surprising everyone. That's partly why the purifiers rose to power. They saw it as contamination of our species. And these human luminary pairs, they're happy. The ones I knew seemed to be. The bond creates a deep connection, a shared understanding that transcends normal relationships. But Jack," she turned to face him fully, "you must understand what you'd be giving up. You could never have a normal human relationship after this. You would be tied to me until death." As if to emphasize her words, a visible shudder ran through her form, and several new cracks appeared along her arms. She gasped in pain, doubling over. Jack caught her before she could fall, and the moment his hands touched her crystalline skin, he felt it, a faint resonance, like a distant song calling to something deep within him. He'd felt hints of it before when helping her, but never this strongly. "You feel it, don't you?" Lyra whispered, her eyes wide. "That's the potential for bonding. Our energies are already trying to align, even without our conscious choice." "How long do you really have?" Jack asked, still holding her steady. Lyra's colors flickered weakly. 3 days, maybe 4. The degradation accelerates towards the end. "And if I—" Jack paused, gathering his courage. "If I agreed to bond with you, what would we need to do?" "Jack, no." Lyra pulled away, her form shaking. "I won't let you sacrifice your future for me. Better to let me fade than trap you in a bond you're not ready for." But as she tried to stand, her legs gave out, and the cracks in her crystalline form spread visibly. Jack caught her again, and this time the resonance between them was strong enough to make them both gasp. In that moment, holding her broken form, Jack realized he had already made his decision days ago. He just hadn't been ready to admit it to himself yet. Jack sat alone in the cockpit, watching the stars streak by as his ship cruised through hyperspace. They were headed to Station Delta 7, the nearest outpost with advanced medical facilities. His fingers drummed nervously on the control panel as he replayed his last conversation with Lyra in his mind. The bonding process, she had explained, her voice growing weaker by the hour, requires specialized equipment. Without proper stabilization, the energy transfer could harm you. She'd been resting in the medical bay, her crystalline form now covered in a web of cracks that glowed faintly from within. The ship's computer interrupted his thoughts. Incoming transmission. Priority channel. Put it through, Jack said, straightening in his chair. The screen flickered to life, showing a gruff-looking station security officer. Cargo vessel Sierra 9, be advised. We've received reports of purifier activity in your sector. They're searching for a luminary fugitive. Any information? Nothing to report. Jack cut in, perhaps too quickly, just making a routine supply run. The officer's eyes narrowed. All vessels are required to submit to scanning upon arrival. New security protocols. Understood. Jack ended the transmission and immediately adjusted their course. They couldn't risk a security scan, not with Lyra aboard. He found her in the medical bay, attempting to stand. Don't, he said, rushing to help her. You need to save your strength. I heard the transmission, Lyra said, her galaxy eyes flickering with worry. The purifiers. They're getting closer. Jack, you have to drop me at the next automated fuel station. I won't let you risk your life for me. That's not happening, Jack said firmly. But we need a new plan. Delta 7 isn't safe anymore. A sudden alarm blared through the ship. Warning. Unknown vessel approaching. Energy signature matches purifier configurations. Jack's heart raced. Can you make it to the cargo hold? Lyra nodded weakly. He helped her up, supporting most of her weight as they moved through the ship. The cargo hold was filled with large containers, perfect for hiding. Here, he said, opening an empty crate designed for transporting sensitive materials. The shielding should mask your energy signature. Another alarm sounded. Incoming transmission. Stay quiet, Jack whispered, sealing the crate. He rushed back to the cockpit just as the screen lit up. A purifier commander appeared, his crystalline form a harsh, angular contrast to Lyra's flowing patterns. Human vessel, prepare for boarding. Our scans detect unusual energy readings. Must be a malfunction, Jack said calmly, despite his pounding heart. I'm running solo, just hauling mining equipment. We'll determine that ourselves. The commander's voice was cold. Any resistance will be met with lethal force. The transmission ended, leaving Jack with precious minutes to decide. He could surrender, hope they wouldn't find Lyra. But the haunted look in her eyes when she spoke of the purifiers told him that wasn't an option. He could run, but their ships were faster. Fighting was suicide. Unless... Jack's hands flew over the controls, making rapid calculations. They were near an unstable stellar phenomenon, a plasma storm that most ships avoided. The purifier's crystalline vessels would be especially vulnerable to that kind of energy disturbance. Computer, plot course through the plasma storm. Divert all power to shields. Warning, suggested course highly dangerous. Survival probability less than 40%. In the cargo hold, Lyra would be protected by the crate's shielding. But for him, in the cockpit, the purifier ship grew larger in his viewport. He had seconds to decide. Jack thought of Lyra, of the strange connection he felt growing between them. He thought of her husband, who died trying to protect her. He thought of the purifiers, spreading their hatred across the stars. Sometimes, he muttered, gripping the controls, you have to roll a hard 6. He punched the throttle, aiming straight for the roiling mass of plasma that lit up space like an angry god. Behind him, the purifier ship opened fire. As his ship plunged into the storm, energy crackling across the hull, Jack prayed he'd made the right choice. Because now, both their lives depended on it. The plasma storm roared around them, battering the ship with waves of energy that made every metal surface crackle. Jack's hands were locked on the controls, his knuckles white as he fought to keep them stable. Warning lights flashed across every screen as systems overloaded. Hull integrity at 47%, the computer announced. Shield failure imminent. Through the rear sensors, Jack watched the purifier ship struggle in the storm. Their crystalline vessel's surface was fracturing under the plasma assault. Suddenly, their ship veered away, unable to withstand the energy bombardment. But victory came at a cost. Jack's ship emerged from the storm with multiple systems failing and their primary power core nearly drained. They limped toward the nearest safe zone, emergency power barely keeping life support running. "Lyra," Jack called out, rushing to the cargo hold once they were clear. He found her crate partially melted, but intact. When he opened it, she was curled up inside, her form dimmer than ever. "You're insane," she whispered as he helped her out. "Beautiful, wonderful, but insane." "Yeah, well." He stopped, noticing new patterns of cracks spreading across her surface. "We need to get you help. Now." "There's a place," Lyra said weakly. "An old research station. The scientists who first studied human luminary bonds. Some of them went into hiding there when the purifiers took power. They might have the equipment we need." Jack helped her to the cockpit as she gave him the coordinates. The station was hidden in an asteroid field, requiring precise navigation through a maze of spinning rocks. As they approached, a harsh voice came over the comms. "Unidentified vessel, hold position or be destroyed." "Wait," Lyra called out, her voice carrying a musical resonance despite her weakness. She spoke in the luminary language, a series of crystalline tones that made the ship's speakers vibrate. After a tense moment, a different voice responded. "By the stars. Lyra, we thought you were dead." The hidden station revealed itself, extending docking arms to guide them in. Inside, they found a small community of luminary scientists and their human mates, living proof that the bond Lyra spoke of was real. But their relief was short-lived. The station's sensors detected multiple purifier vessels approaching. The plasma storm had only delayed them. "The bonding chamber is ready," one of the scientist pairs told them. "A luminary woman and her human husband. But the process takes time. If the purifiers find us before it's complete." Jack looked at Lyra, who could barely stand now. The cracks in her form had spread so much that she looked like a shattered mirror barely holding together. "What are our odds?" he asked the scientists. "The bonding process has a 70% success rate under ideal conditions," they explained. "With her deterioration this advanced, perhaps 40%. And if it fails, the energy backlash could kill you both." Lyra grabbed Jack's hand. "No, I won't risk your life. You've done enough." The station shook as the first purifier weapons hit their shields. "Multiple hostile vessels detected," the station's AI announced. "Shield failure in 10 minutes." Jack looked at Lyra, then at the bonding chamber, a crystalline structure humming with energy. All his life, he played it safe, stuck to cargo runs and simple jobs. But now, looking at her dying form, he knew there was only one choice he could live with. "We're doing this," he said firmly. The scientists rushed to prepare them as the station shuddered under another attack. Jack and Lyra were positioned in the chamber, their hands clasped together as crystalline electrodes were attached to them both. "The process cannot be stopped once it begins," they were warned. "Are you absolutely certain?" Jack looked into Lyra's galaxy eyes, seeing hope, fear, and something else that made his heart race. "Start it," he said. Energy flooded the chamber. Jack felt like every cell in his body was being rewritten, tuned to a new frequency. He could feel Lyra's essence reaching for his, their very souls trying to intertwine. Through their growing connection, he felt her memories, the love she'd shared with her first husband, the terror of the purifier's rise, the overwhelming guilt at asking Jack to take this risk. And she felt his lonely years in space, his growing feelings for her, his absolute certainty that this was right. The station rocked with explosions. Through the chamber's walls, they heard fighting break out as the purifiers breached the outer defenses. Almost there, the scientists called out, "Don't break contact." The pain was incredible now, but Jack held on. He could feel something building between them, a resonance that grew stronger with each heartbeat. Lyra's cracked form began to glow, the fractures slowly healing as their energies aligned. The chamber door burst open. A purifier soldier raised his weapon. But it was too late to stop what had begun. The bond surged into completion, and a wave of pure energy exploded outward from the chamber, knocking the purifiers off their feet. Where it touched them, their crystalline forms cracked and shattered. Jack and Lyra collapsed together, but they were whole, complete. The bond hummed between them like a perfect note that had always been waiting to be struck. Through their new connection, they felt each other's joy, relief, and something much deeper, a love that had grown from compassion into destiny. The station's defenders quickly overwhelmed the remaining purifiers. Other ships were approaching, but they were friendly, rebels within the Luminary government who had been waiting for proof of the purifiers' crimes. Jack helped Lyra stand, marveling at how he could feel her strength returning through their bond. Her form shone with renewed vigor, colors swirling beneath her crystalline surface like auroras. "You're stuck with me now," he said with a grin. Lyra's laughter echoed through both their minds, a sound of pure joy. "I wouldn't have it any other way." 1 year after their bonding, Jack stood at the viewport of their new ship, watching the crystalline spires of the luminary capital rise up from the planet's surface. Through their bond, he felt Lyra's mix of emotions as they approached her homeworld. Joy, anxiety, determination. "Ready?" he asked, though he already knew her answer through their shared connection. Lyra stepped beside him, her crystalline form glowing with health and purpose. "With you? Always." The past year had transformed both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. After the incident at the research station, the evidence of the purifier's crimes had sparked a revolution within Luminary society. The recordings of their attack on peaceful researchers, combined with testimony from other survivors, had finally forced the government to act. Their ship, larger and more advanced than Jack's old cargo vessel, was a gift from the new Luminary Council. Named Starbridge, it served as both their home and their mission vessel, designed to accommodate both human and luminary biology. As they descended through the atmosphere, Jack reflected on how their bond had evolved. The initial connection had deepened into something beautiful and complex. They could share thoughts when they chose to, feel each other's emotions, and even lend each other strength. Jack had discovered he could now perceive energy patterns in ways no normal human could, while Lyra had gained a deeper understanding of human intuition and adaptability. The spaceport welcomed them with a display of lights that danced through the crystalline architecture. A small crowd had gathered, other human luminary pairs who had come out of hiding, along with supporters of the new integration policies. Ambassador Jack and Ambassador Lyra, the Port Authority announced as they disembarked. "The Council awaits your report." They had spent the past year traveling to remote colonies and stations, finding other mixed pairs and helping them return from exile. Each success story helped change more minds among the conservative luminary factions. In the council chambers, the newly installed leaders, a mix of traditional luminary and progressives, listened as Jack and Lyra presented their findings. Through their bond, they took turns speaking, their words flowing together in perfect harmony. "We've documented 57 successful human luminary bonds," Lyra reported. "Each pair brings unique insights into how our species can complement each other. The fear that these bonds would contaminate luminary society has been proven false," Jack added. "Instead, they've led to technological and cultural advances that benefit both species." They shared examples. Human luminary engineering teams developing new types of energy systems, mixed medical researchers discovering treatments for previously incurable conditions, artists creating entirely new forms of expression that combined human emotion with luminary energy manipulation. After the presentation, they walked through the capital's crystal gardens, where monuments to those lost in the purifier conflict now stood. Lyra paused at one bearing her first husband's name. Through their bond, Jack felt her bittersweet memories, but also her peace with the past. She had loved before, and that love had helped make her who she was. Now she loved again, differently but just as deeply. "Look," she said, pointing to a new addition to the garden. Young luminary children were playing with human kids from the growing Earth Embassy. The children's laughter echoed through the crystalline structures, creating subtle patterns of light. "They're growing up without fear," Jack observed, "without the prejudice that nearly tore your world apart." "Our world," Lyra corrected, sending a wave of affection through their bond. "And speaking of growth," she took his hand, sharing a piece of news she'd been saving. Jack's eyes widened as he felt it through their connection, a tiny spark of energy, different from anything he'd felt before. "Is that?" Lyra's form glowed brighter with joy. "The doctors confirmed it yesterday. The first natural human luminary child. They say the bond made it possible." Jack pulled her close, their shared happiness creating ripples of light in the crystal gardens around them. Through their bond, they could feel the future taking shape, a future neither of them could have imagined when he first found her broken escape pod. As the twin suns set, casting rainbow refractions through the crystal city, other bonded pairs joined them in the garden. Each couple had their own story, their own journey from fear to love, from separation to unity. Together, they represented hope, not just for their two species, but for all those who believed that love could bridge any distance, heal any wound, and unite any difference. "To think," Jack said, looking at their gathered friends, "all this started because you had the courage to ask a simple cargo hauler to be your husband." Lyra's laughter chimed through their bond. "And you had the courage to say yes." Around them, the crystal city sang with the energy of transformation, of barriers falling and new possibilities rising. Their child would grow up in a world where love knew no boundaries, where difference was celebrated rather than feared. Through their bond, they shared a vision of that future, and together, they stepped forward to help build it. The end.